We are no longer the Ukraine that existed before the war. I call it the old Ukraine. Now, a new Ukraine is taking shape for us. It's very important for Ukrainian women that we are heard, and that's what sets us apart from the women of our enemy.
In general, our folklore is truly full of powerful images of strong women like these. The wise girl is a typical archetypal image that, for example, does not exist in Russian folklore.
She tells you, don't do that, Ivasik Vitilesik. I say, go ahead, take it, Roshka, you understand that it's calling you. I think, my God, this is my community, so finally I can say everything I think. How much longer can I hold it in,
Welcome! I'm Nicholas Istke, and this is Archetype of the Nation, a cultural project that explores the foundations of Ukrainian national identity. What we were, what we became, what we have and can be. We look for answers in folklore, as well as in conversations with prominent representatives of our nation. Today our guest is rap artist Blackfish. Good afternoon, Marie.
Hi.
Each episode of our project is dedicated to one of the values characteristic of the Ukrainian nation, one of the elements of our identity. And with you, we would like to talk about such a value as love of freedom.
That's interesting. It's right on point because love of freedom is characteristic of our women.
When preparing this episode, we usually research how a particular value is represented in folklore and draw certain conclusions. Regarding love of freedom, we came up with the following idea. For a Ukrainian, being free means valuing personal and public freedom, independence of choice, dignity, and the right to self-determination. Striving for freedom is not about wanting to separate, but about the ability and the right to be a free person within the space of family, community, country, and the world. And for you, Mari, what does love of freedom mean?
I'll be very down to earth and say for me, love of freedom is being a musician and having the ability to choose the specific role and creative persona that I truly desire and to determine precisely how I want to express myself. And it was precisely during the tumultuous period of the war that my deep inner willpower was most vividly and powerfully expressed in declaring myself unequivocally as a rap artist. Before that significant time, I was primarily known as a singer of quite a high poetic genre, meaning essentially a person who sang about profound and higher values. After, on the third year of the war, having sung at the front and gained certain experiences, my inner structure changed a lot. And it became important for me to tell the truth. It became important for me to be honest. At that time, I was studying at a literary school. I wanted to write a book, but that idea creatively ricocheted into rap. So I started writing, but I started writing rap. For me, freedom is, first of all, being in creativity, being who I feel I am, and secondly, to speak. To say what I want to say, to have freedom of speech.
And if you remember your childhood, what were you like as a young child? Were you always obedient, or perhaps more inclined to argue and firmly stand up for your own opinion?
That's a very complicated and rather intricate story, because in my early childhood I was actually a very obedient and well-behaved child. My father was an officer and later he became a miner. When he finished his military career, now my dad is in the armed forces of Ukraine and my mom is a teacher. And in a family like that, well, it's just impossible to be someone who isn't obedient. But on the other hand, when I grew older, that's when my teenage search for myself began. Being an excellent student, being the obedient daughter of a teacher, I realized that I felt very uncomfortable being confined within certain boundaries. And so I was searching for myself then, and I already had some very vivid, revolutionary protest-like expressions as a teenager, as a girl, very uncharacteristic ones. My dad always tells me that he raised himself in me. You became just like me. So I'm both my dad's daughter and his child. I have a strong enough character to disagree and to speak up about what I don't want. That's why it's uncomfortable.
Did your dad teach you to stand up for your opinion?
He taught me, but my mom was always between us, because if there were conflicts in our family, sparks would always fly. It's impossible to break me. And my dad, it's impossible for him too. He would never agree to anything bad. He always stood up for what was right. He taught me, he gave me formed my value system. But my mom is a different kind of person. She's a musician, she's creative, she's softer, while my dad always built structure for me, showed me strength of character and how to maintain discipline. And maybe that's something that really connected with my childhood. My mom's nature and my dad's character. And that's precisely why, right now, perhaps this particular image that I currently carry as a rap artist truly reminds me of my own childhood and my teenage rebellion. How I sometimes strongly disagreed with my parents and also disagreed with my teachers, because when you genuinely have your own personal opinion, you might indeed be wrong, but it's incredibly important for you to, at the very least, express it clearly. That's why I think it's very much connected to childhood.
For you, is freedom more about an inner state, or is it about freedom from external prohibitions, restrictions?
Well, I truly think it's fundamentally about having your very own strong opinion, which you consistently try to stand up for, and you readily agree that even if you are completely wrong, you can truly and honestly admit your mistake. That's also about freedom, because when you're searching for your own values, when you're searching for new meanings, and right now is exactly the time when we're looking for new meanings, because for me right now it's a very active process, like Blackfish, searching for new words to describe what I see in our society. Our values have changed a lot, people have changed. We are no longer the Ukraine that existed before the war. I call that the old Ukraine. Now a new Ukraine is taking shape, and for me the feeling of the new Ukraine was exactly there at the front when I would come and sing for the soldiers. That's where it was formed. And the values I saw there, I try to somehow describe them and convey to people what I feel now, what is happening in society, between the civilian world, the world of the military, our volunteer community, our community as a whole. I also volunteer myself, so I am in a very active search. And if I make a mistake, for me as a person who I accept it reasonably that I can be wrong. Freedom of choice is also the freedom to make mistakes and to acknowledge them in a mature way, to show your position by admitting that you are wrong somewhere. It's also perfectly normal to say, sorry, I was wrong.
Well, it's actually a certain strength to be able to admit your mistakes.
Yes, because true freedom isn't just about your personal willpower or inherent love of freedom. It's not only about doing something purely out of defiance or simply because you genuinely want to, but also very much about bearing the full consequences and taking complete responsibility for all your actions. Yeah. If you make a mistake, made a mistake, it's your mistake. Or if some of your actions led to wrong results that could harm someone, then you will be the one. Well, in my family, it's customary that we can't just say thank you. How do you forget about something you did wrong? That is, in our family, everyone is always responsible for their actions and their words.
Have you often had to say no in your life, standing up for your personal freedom and your deeply held beliefs?
That's my favorite word. For me personally, I don't know. It's just that if I see something truly significant being offered to me, I always tend to say, no, I really don't want to. I simply won't do it. And lately, I've been experiencing a lot of this kind of internal paralysis, a deep reluctance. I don't want to take on too many new things or additional responsibilities right now. So it's really hard for me to move forward right now. I don't know what it's connected to. Maybe I found some state within myself that I really value. And maybe because of the ongoing war, I just don't have enough psychological or emotional resources to switch gears so very quickly. So for me, it's incredibly important perhaps to say no to certain things that make me feel quite uncomfortable and not to constantly strive to meet other people's often unrealistic expectations.
Speaking of the feeling of true freedom, was there ever a particular moment in your life when you felt the most free ever? Have you ever had that feeling?
When we were performing in Donbass with the cultural landing team, I was there for a week and we had a really nice team. There was Olia, the photographer, Dima, the bandura player, and Valera, who was our commander at the time. So he was kind of the commander of the cultural landing team, the one who organized everything. And it was exactly that feeling of Donetsk. I don't even truly know how to adequately describe it, that incredible spirit of the East. It really gave me a profound sense of freedom that I remember very, very well. I don't feel that particular way now at this moment. Maybe it was also because we were performing right before the very first major counteroffensive and before our first disappointment as a people. That's why back then we still had that initial patriotic spirit. I remember those waves very clearly. The wave before the first counteroffensive, how I sang, how a person sang. And after the counteroffensive, when there was a certain disappointment, and that's why everything changes very quickly here. Freedom is something very elusive, in my opinion.
Can it manifest itself in some small everyday things compared to big philosophical categories? For example, in one's lifestyle, in the choice of clothing, in the food we eat? Can a deep love of freedom truly manifest itself in a person?
You know, this love of freedom is very characteristic. I already started talking about this to our women because it's very important for us, for Ukrainian women. It's very important that we are heard. And this is precisely what truly sets us apart from the women of our enemy. Because in my considered opinion, Ukrainian women have always been very outspoken, incredibly independent, exceptionally proactive, and always ready to protest. No. We have, well, you know, it certainly seems like we have a patriarchal country, but in actual reality, everyone truly knows that women have a very strong and significant influence on what our men genuinely think and what they ultimately do. It's not because they choose it that way. It's just the way things are. And I really like this concept. By the way, I studied at the Ukrainian philology faculty, and our professor of Ukrainian literature told us that Ukrainian women are descendants of the Amazons, that the Amazons were here among us, and in general we have that strength, we have that very powerful feminine, I don't know, some kind of gene that allows us to fearlessly say to someone's face what we think. And this shows up in many things. The way our women truly do business, the way they think outside the box in their creative projects, the way they volunteer, and also the way they always step forward. First and foremost, sorry girls. First and foremost, the girls who are in the armed forces. I mean, that's just incredible. Women who volunteer or agree to sign contracts, who work in the military sphere, that's a whole separate topic for me and a special kind of respect. And so perhaps this is truly the very powerful expression of willpower that deeply inspires me. I can clearly and distinctly see it.
By the way, speaking of love of freedom in folklore, we have a very beautiful image, you probably know about it. For me personally, it's a very vivid one. It's the Povitrulia, a Carpathian mythological character. What is the essence of her love of freedom? Have you heard about her?
I'll tell a story related to that later.
All right. So what exactly is the essence of her love of freedom? It's just that she has wings. And in order to truly make the Povitrulia his wife, a man has to steal her wings and then hide them somewhere safe. But if she finds her wings, she will immediately fly up to her sisters and to her mother, the Povitrulia. And this is really a powerful image of a truly free woman who deeply values her personal freedom more than the constraints of married life, probably. And in general, our rich folklore has a lot of powerful and vivid images of such strong and resilient women. The wise girl is a typical, archetypal image that doesn't exist in Russian folklore, for example. But in Ukrainian folklore, the truly wise girl can solve all the problems herself, help the young man, kill the villain, or do something to him in some other way, perhaps even more cunningly. And she is an exceptionally active and independent agent, so to speak, one who truly controls the trajectory of her own life, making her own decisions, and absolutely does not submit to the will or desires of any man. So this has been ingrained in us since ancient times, in our very genotype. As a philologist, since you mentioned this, I have a question for the philologist. In your opinion, can the love of freedom of Ukrainians be expressed through language? That's a difficult question, probably.
Yeah, I should have prepared for that. You know, that's something you can't just answer off the cuff. Well, I would recall the words of our national anthem, right? We will lay down our souls and bodies for our freedom. That is for us in general, basically. For me, Ukraine is profoundly associated with unwavering courage and profound freedom. What I constantly truly observe and witness, sentimentality, meaning the creative side of Ukrainians, is very vivid. Freedom and courage. Moreover, both courage and freedom are inherent in both men and women. This is something that keeps repeating throughout our history. We see examples of incredible women who, through their lives, demonstrate this strength. And it seems to me that, for example, in our anthem, we will lay down our souls and bodies for our freedom. This is actually a very complex thing. When people fight for their country, they are indeed ready to give their bodies, but for this to be truly and fully realized, for it to be deeply and completely genuine inside, I think we shouldn't focus on the idea that I have to die for Ukraine. We need to be truly ready to live for Ukraine, to bravely fight for Ukraine. And I would like our fundamental concept that we are indeed fighting for freedom to clearly show how incredibly fearless we are, but at the very same time, we do this because we profoundly want to live. So it's very important here, in my opinion, to talk about our vitality. That is, we are like this. We are very vital. All our rituals are connected with the birth of new and vibrant life, with how we truly cleanse ourselves of the bad and negative aspects. That is, we have a lot of these bright rituals which are connected with light, with goodness, and in general, we are a very vital nation. So we all know this. And there are a lot of protective charms, a lot of things that show we are always on the side of light. And I really like this about us, how we can understand ourselves by looking at our rituals, at all our calendar-based ceremonies, our cherished holidays, what particular sequence we have, and precisely how we are deeply connected to nature.
Yes, and this inherent closeness to nature, it left a certain indelible mark on how people behaved and how they deeply longed for freedom, because, for example, in Western Europe, people mostly lived in bustling cities, within or near protective city walls, while Ukrainians have always lived more in scattered villages, much closer to flowing rivers, dense forests, open fields, the vast, expansive steppe, from where danger could come on one hand, but on the other hand, you could go there yourself if you truly needed to experience the utmost freedom.
And then let's remember the Cossacks, how they left everyone behind during serfdom. They were free people. They were born in Ukraine and went eastward. The Zaporizhian Cossacks formed on completely empty land, the Zaporizhian steppe, which was barren. There was nothing there, and people simply fled there to be free. So this also says a lot about us. It's one of the main vivid stages in our history. A stage in the formation of statehood that was based on the desire of people to be free. They wanted to be on their own land and build their lives independently with their own hands. And there they created their own culture. Well, we already know all this. And Maidan, as they say, by tradition, we have all of this.
Do you think this love of freedom, this traditional idea, that it actually comes from the Zaporizhian Sich, the image of the Cossacks, free people? Is it really truly from those ancient historical times, or could it be from even earlier eras of the Ukrainian people?
It's hard for me to say. I'm not from ancient times. I wasn't there. In this entire life, as far back as I can remember, I can only truly rely on the profound experience I personally see in my own individual life. I see many different Ukrainians. But as soon as we face some very great danger, that's when we truly know how to come together. We absolutely know how to do great and remarkable things together somehow. At the same time, everyone is truly unique, very proud of their own individual character. So we can just understand how incredibly different we are, how truly unlike each other we are, but still, somehow we always stick together. I really like that about us, how we stick together. And I really want people to keep holding on and searching for bridges, for ways to stay together, to not split into little groups or bubbles. So that's probably what seems like a paradox to me, how people from the East, for example, people from Kharkiv, despite the conflicts we occasionally have, the ones I'm talking about specifically, we still somehow manage to truly find, those important keys to each other. And normal people, reasonable, mature adults, anyone who is mentally healthy and mature won't yell at someone else just because that person came from another region, or tell them things like, you have to speak this way or you have to be like this. Because we respect the experiences of other people. And so, first and foremost, for me, being Ukrainian means being an individual. Because our country, as I profoundly hope, is truly built upon the fundamental value of individuality, upon the inherent worth and dignity of each and every person, not merely as a cog in a system, not as some kind of uniform level, not like, let's all be precisely the same, like those truly misguided and crazy communist system people. We are not system people. And everyone who isn't part of the system understands this. And we have so many enterprises, so many discoveries, so many initiatives, and so much creative energy. And our business community is not just atypical. And all of this is about individuality, about the power of individuality. And that's why when a person arrives and is different, this is exactly about being your own, being a stranger, being a different kind of your own. These are the main categories that we constantly encounter, our own Ukrainians or foreigners. But what unites us is that we manage to come to an agreement that we are still our own, even though we are different. Maybe there is a certain xenophobia. I conducted research. Basically, we raised this topic while we were in Kryvyi at the Ukrainian philology department. We talked about the problems we have. This was in 2011 to 2012 during my 4th and 5th years at university. And we talked about the fact that indeed there are certain categories of xenophobia among us. Unfortunately, they are becoming more acute, and the Russians are now taking advantage of this. They are very good at playing on all our weaknesses, but we still manage to hold on to our common sense. I would like to share my opinion as a philologist. Right now, we are focusing our attention on what language we use to speak to each other. However, it is truly important to fully understand that language in its very essence absolutely cannot exist without the individual human being. In other words, no matter what language you speak, your values and your personality, which you convey through language, are actually the most important thing. That is what kind of person you are. It doesn't matter, I'm not saying that. For me, everything is in Ukrainian. I speak Ukrainian, I've been singing in Ukrainian for 15 years now, and I write rap in Ukrainian. But motivation through violence and humiliation is not for us. That is, we absolutely should not follow a very destructive path indeed. It's important to support, it's important to understand that everyone has trauma, everyone has maybe, how to put it, neuroplasticity of the brain that not everyone is ready to learn, not everyone. My grandmother in Kryvyi is an elderly person, my grandmother in Odessa as well. It's a completely different brain, a completely different way of perceiving new information. That's why we need to respect elderly people. We need to respect those who have come with trauma after some very terrible losses. They also experience a certain shock. They also have certain particularities in their thinking. So that's why psychological attitude is very important for how our language will develop. In aggressive, destructive dialogues, it only gets utterly destroyed, but at the same time, we must not lose its inherent value. And since I teach the Ukrainian language, I now see a significant decline in that is for people to diligently study the Ukrainian language. I mean, I teach IT companies, business owners, and now I see that there's been a certain decline. Right after the war started, there was a very strong demand. I had a lot of students. Now, it's not so much students from Ukraine, but for example, I get requests from America to teach children. There are Ukrainians who left, who have been living there for a long time, who have assimilated, and now they want to return to their Ukrainian roots. They want this to develop their own identity, and they look for teachers for their children. For example, I have a girl in New York. There is no school there. They don't have discipline. They don't have a teacher. And since New York is a very complicated city, you know how hard it is to manage your time there. You just end up there. You simply can't plan your time. So online learning...
It's the same in Kyiv.
Well, not quite like in New York. So people just realize that they... And in terms of time... And probably it's cheaper to teach a child online with a Ukrainian teacher or tutor over the internet. So that's how it works out for us. But I see that we need to find new motivations, some new meanings, so that people want to improve their language skills and not just stay at one level. I know the Ukrainian language, but we don't know it well enough. I keep learning it all the time. So it's a very Damn, I know we start with freedom loving, but I keep coming back to language because it's my favorite topic.
Language is probably also a marker, firstly, of the nation's archetype, a marker of the nation itself, so it's always appropriate to talk about language. But going back to freedom loving, we started talking about the fact that Ukrainians, well, it's well known, we are individualists. That is, Ukrainians are individualists. They care first and foremost about their own home. And at the same time, they care about their country in case a certain danger arises. We saw all of this immediately in 2022.
And we see it now.
And we continue to see it now as well. Although, again, you just mentioned that there is a certain decline in interest in learning the language. That is, people are tired in some places, somewhere, well, probably, first and foremost, they're just tired, and in some cases there are other tasks. But with this strong sense of individualism, there is a certain subtle nuance, let's say, or perhaps a certain inherent conflict, that at some critical point it truly starts working not entirely in our favor, but rather quite significantly against us. When, in fact, this profound love of personal freedom genuinely starts to create certain significant and noticeable problems. Despotism, because when it's absolutely necessary to organize effectively against an external enemy, everyone quickly and efficiently comes together. But when it's truly necessary to unite and systematically move forward together toward a very specific common goal over the course of 1 or 2, for 3, 5, 10, or even more years, then people naturally start thinking that they're truly freedom-loving individuals. They possess their own unique ideas, their own personal desires, and indeed, everyone has their own distinct opinion about precisely how things should be, and accordingly, that's when the actual conflict truly begins. First, there's an internal conflict, and then conflicts start to arise directly between people. So my question is this. In your opinion, where does this love of freedom stop being a positive thing? At what point does the boundary appear when each individual's love of freedom starts to create problems?
You know, I truly think that when we carefully consider a certain category, it's really important to look at it as a complete whole. That is, if we have a love of freedom, then we also have a fear of being restricted. In other words, it's like two sides of the same coin, and it's a single unified concept. We just need to truly see and acknowledge the full range of all those various feelings that arise within each and every one of us. Not everyone is aware of them. Everyone is at very different stages of self-development and life situation through their own internal crises. That's why everything we call a love of freedom can manifest in different ways. For example, a person might be altruistic, oriented toward helping others, freedom-loving, ready to work, and stable. For them, it's their natural, healthy state. But for others, it's difficult. They turn inward, practicing healthy egoism, closing themselves off. It's important for them to think about themselves, to survive. They have different priorities, and they don't want to give too much energy to the community because they often think, well, I've already given more than enough. And so this is fundamentally about the essential resources we possess, about our inherent capabilities and the profound resilience of our character. What I truly believe we are lacking right now is, a systematic discipline and a consistent kind of routine. We need to realize that, in fact, our war has already become a routine. It is both highly informational and deeply cultural, and it's also psychological and economic as well in our own specific field as civilians. And what's happening with the military over there? Well, that's on a whole other level. People are going through such terrifying experiences that we can't even compare ourselves to them. And so if you don't understand the price people at the front are paying, it might seem to you that you're just a poor, tired soul, that you've already given away all your money, done everything you could, and now you just want to rest and finally live your best life. And honestly, you don't even feel ashamed about it. And, I think it's important to remind civilians that, but we are paying a very high price and we can't afford to forget that. And there needs to be, a kind of leadership, like a backbone, I guess, a core group of people who keep reminding everyone. And, in pedagogy, there's this idea, thank you, that when you're teaching something, you need to repeat it consistently. And when we repeat the same thing, even though it seems like everyone's already heard it, maybe just phrased differently, it gradually starts to sink in. And we've been repeating it so many times, well, let's push ourselves a little more and repeat it again. These are indeed simple things, but these simple things are very easily and often forgotten because of the disappointment you mentioned and the fatigue. We understand what these things are connected to. That is, first and foremost, it's connected to the fact that the war is very hard for us, that we don't have enough people at the front, that those who went in 2022 are lacking moral, psychological, and physical resources. In other words, the volunteer movement is basically holding the front right now, but we don't really want to help in any way. On the one hand, we want to help, and we can do it with money. But on the other hand, we're not helping as much anymore. So all of this turns out to be inconsistent. And for me, as someone who is now trying to keep organizing all these fundraisers, I see that donations are dropping. I notice a certain trend that, for example, in the summer, fundraising goes very poorly. It's just consistent. And then in the fall, things somehow change.
The business season starts.
Yeah. Maybe it's somehow connected to the fact that people just don't have money. And in the summer, that's exactly when these offensives intensify. So I can already see that the Russians, well, I won't use bad words, the Russians really ramp up their activity in the summer. It's just become a consistent pattern for them. And you realize that during the most difficult times, our fundraising drops and people's motivation declines. But the military really needs help. So you already see a certain picture that needs to be explained to people, needs to be conveyed through new formats, because you just can't reach people through the news anymore. We've all seen all these news stories. Well, and it's really hard for me to comment on some things in this regard. Just from my own life experience, I can say that we love freedom, but we're also very lazy. And that's exactly about us. Our love of freedom is also about that sense of liberty, like, why should I have to do this? And so, well, there's this fundamental thing that a person is generally supposed to have some kind of experienced mentor who thoughtfully tells them precisely why they should undertake a particular action or endeavor. Consequently, the people of Ukraine have a significant and pressing need for some kind of strong guiding leader. I'm not saying it absolutely has to be some kind of monarchy, like there's only one single person who speaks for absolutely everyone, but there always truly needs to be this ongoing dynamic leadership. Someone new genuinely says something and people are like, oh, that's really quite cool. And so you have to keep these people interested because they're elusive Ukrainians. They're very chaotic, and each one truly has their own distinct opinion. Everyone is their own individual person, as they often say. 4 hetmans, right?
3, I think.
3, well, I don't remember, but for me it's already 4.
Where 2 Ukrainians are 4 hetmans.
Yes, maybe even 4 already, but for me it's already 4 hetmans. Because everyone, a person who loves freedom, tends to become egocentric. Why should I? Or I can do it better. That's why it's very important here to also evaluate yourself psychologically as an individual. Are you a mature enough person to even tell anyone anything at all? And on the other hand, you need to have enough self-esteem to value yourself. So it's a very complex balance. Sometimes the best people don't believe in themselves enough. That is, those who do a lot can actually be very quiet and not value themselves. And maybe you need to do more, or maybe you need to speak up. And for a person who frequently shouts a lot, for them it's very, very easy indeed, but they actually do very little work at all. And that's just how it is with us.
Let me remind you that today in the studio of the Archetype of the Nation project, we are talking about love of freedom with rap artist Blackfish. Do you often go to the front?
Not often. I go often in the sense that I travel there once a season. I can go for a week. I was there in the spring, but I couldn't make it in the summer because I traveled to Europe. For me, people often say it's frequent, but in reality it's not, because there are people who go every week.
Let's put it this way. You regularly visit the front lines, and you speak with both career military personnel and those individuals who became soldiers. In fact, who were mobilized in the year 2022. And here's another significant point about the love of freedom, which truly arises when, on the one hand, you go to defend your country, to fight for freedom, but then, on the other hand, you ultimately end up in the army, where there is no freedom at all. because that's truly the kind of structure it is. There can't be genuine freedom there, since it's a certain kind of established system. And when talking with military personnel, maybe you've already discussed this, or maybe you know how they effectively resolve this significant internal conflict for themselves.
Just yesterday, in fact, we were actively discussing this significant topic with a dedicated serviceman, a truly committed volunteer, and indeed a very respectable and honorable person. I was telling him, well, I watched the news that China held its biggest and most significant parade in 80 long years. I said, all these very important big shots got together and you absolutely can't even swear there. All these old men have gathered and are celebrating something completely incomprehensible. Their own thing, I don't even know what they've come up with there. When I was talking to him, I said, but we Ukrainians, we're for democracy, we're free people, individuality, human rights. And my friend says to me, I don't feel any individuality or rights in the army at all. I feel like I have no rights whatsoever. So yes, it really is a very tough ordeal for our men and women who end up there. And for women, by the way, it's especially hard because there's a whole separate issue when it comes to women. Sometimes there are very bad situations that girls find themselves in. And specifically in terms of gender, the fact that she is a woman and there are a lot of complaints directed at her because of that. And the army, it truly seems to me, is now at that very crucial and significant turning point in its history. When the old army, the one that existed before the war, the professional one, which was still a legacy of the Soviet era, is being replaced by a new army thanks to the arrival of professional volunteers. New people have come in, people who were in business, who were progressive, people who actually created something in this world, who were truly bright individuals and still are, in fact. And they do not submit. They continue to work in their own style, in their own way. They are changing this industry. They do a lot of things that are forbidden, break the rules, and get into conflicts with commanders who don't suit them. So I am very, very proud of these dedicated people. That is, for me, this entire process is not about saying in the army it's only ever done this specific way. I clearly see that a lot is truly boiling, a lot is genuinely happening in some kind of ongoing process, whether in civilian life, in the army, in Ukraine in general, or even in politics. And wherever we look, something is actively and continuously transforming everywhere. What is it that's transforming? This alchemy depends on how strong a particular element will be. That is, if I truly want Ukraine to be the kind of country I deeply dream of, then I will do absolutely everything I possibly can from my side. And I understand that I am just one small person. I can't influence the scale of the whole country, but my own little bubble of 5,000 people, 10,000 people, that's also some small contribution. And if there are more people like that, then in principle, little by little, we will start to change.
So you're saying that the love of freedom in the army now is also encouraging change?
I think it's thanks to love of freedom the army is holding together. Because if we were following the scenario of, a regular professional military...
A small Russian army?
Well, yes, I'm not downplaying the role of certain things that have been proven by military experience, things that already exist, and there really are important things there that work, but the victorious spirit of Ukraine is rooted in the volunteer movement. So career military personnel, they reinforce, they provide a certain structure. It's like a machine that holds everything together. The structure of our army itself with a vision of how to distribute everything, and it knows what needs to be done. But there is the spirit and body. Perhaps we can say this is some kind of body, the one that was given. Our military structure is the body, while the spirit is the volunteer movement, all those people who came forward. One cannot exist without the other anymore, but it is the spirit that is decisive. Whatever a person feels inside, that is what their body will become. Wherever their desire leads, the body will follow. I would really like our volunteer army to become the decisive force in what happens with our military.
Now, a deeply philosophical question. Why do you think the love of freedom has become such an important part of our Ukrainian identity?
I just can't speak for all of Ukraine, of course. As I said, it's hard for me to evaluate certain historical processes where I wasn't physically present. And likewise, I can't speak for the whole country. I can only speak for myself. In 2022, at the beginning of the year, even before the invasion, I had information that there would be a war, and my friends suggested that I should leave. I refused. I said that no matter what happens, I will stay here. When I was in Lviv for about a month and a half, right at the time when Kyiv was under occupation, I was in Lviv for a month and a half. And at that time, there was an offer to go abroad with friends. I didn't go. It seems to me that something deep inside us about our inner personal choice is very similar indeed. And somehow we are in a certain profound harmony with each other, making a shared collective choice. And that ultimately is the majority. I'm not saying that everyone is perfect. For me, honestly, I never pay attention to those people who don't support me. I don't pay attention to those who act differently because I have my own path. And I focus on those who make the same choices I do. I see that these are worthy, great people. I look up to them. There are many people I am incredibly proud of because they do amazing things. Compared to what I do, honestly, what I do is just dust. But what my friends do, commanders, acquaintances, volunteers, it's nonsense. I really look up to people like that, and that inner choice, what is it dictated by? A little bit. For me, it's probably dictated very much by my own conscience. I have a conscience, this inner voice, and if I do something wrong, I feel uncomfortable inside, and it's very awkward for me. But if a person is able to make compromises, and they make that compromise once, then a second time, they stop hearing that voice. It seems to me that this very voice of conscience is instilled in us by our parents, our grandmothers and grandfathers, by folklore, songs, and the kind of aura that was created for us in childhood, in what we believe in. And if you hear that voice, it seems so simple. It tells you, don't do that, little Ivasik, Telisik, Verninda, Vereshka. In other words, you understand that something is calling out to you. That is, you realize that something from those ancient times is speaking to you, and you make this choice, and you listen to your heart.
Let's talk about voice, about Blackfish, about your new project. You mentioned that it was born during your volunteer trips to the Donetsk region. But you've been singing since childhood, and you also said that several generations in your family have sung as well, right? And most likely it wasn't rap.
Yes, it wasn't rap, but for me, rap is poetry, because rap stands for Rhythmic American Poetry. It's one of the genres of poetry that is specifically characteristic of America. And that's why it's so popular and important for me in Ukraine right now. Because this poetry, rap, is connected specifically with human rights. It's about the fact that we are fighting for freedom, for the truth. There is a certain culture in rap that I already miss in my own culture, where I used to sing, in my indie space. Maybe I just don't see it. I was missing the truth. There was a lot that was similar, a lot that felt the same to me. And I was looking for something different. I was searching for some new words. That's why I took a literature course, because I'm basically a philologist. And since I also have a philological education, I've always written poetry. I've always written my own songs, both the lyrics and the music. And honestly, there are two components within me. I'm a person who's all about lyrics and music. But for me, the lyrics have always been more important than the music. And I've put a lot of my thoughts, some essences into them. But perhaps at some point in time, the musical aspect became much more prominent within the overall musical project, so I simply followed the music. And now I want to focus more on creating lyrics. That's why rap was a true revelation for me, because it combines both freedom of expression and also, in its very essence, by the way, the kind of freedom we're talking about, being yourself. And right now, it's a protest genre that's actually healthy. That is to say, it's absolutely not associated with any kind of truly destructive subculture. For me, rap music is fundamentally all about authentically telling the truth and telling the profound truth about what you genuinely observe in people. It is a powerful social genre that's much more about... It can be about individual experiences too, but in general, rap is very much about people. So if you carefully look at the lyrics in America and also in England, the primary topics they frequently raise are essentially about social connections, about what truly happens between people. And that's very important. In other words, rap is a very collective form of creativity. And rappers, well, I was really pleased when I started making rap. At first, my music crowd honestly didn't get it when I showed them. But I shared it with my granddaughter and she told me, you know, I don't know what this is, but I'm telling you, it's something interesting. Keep doing it. So she was the one who really inspired me to do this. She said, find someone who can show you how to do it, but this is something cool and awesome. And since this genre is quite untypical for rap, spoken word, because rap in general is more rhythmic, more familiar, simpler, while spoken word is more complex. Poetry where the rhymes aren't so straightforward. People expect simple square rhymes, but my lyrics are very intricate, long, and they have parallel rhymes, or rhymes that aren't so direct. For example, a syllable, I say, might rhyme with a word or a sentence that doesn't follow the usual pattern we think in, but it still sounds very musical. So it's an interesting point, and in general,
The Archetype of the Nation is created with the support of the Ukrainian Cultural Foundation and is released in various formats. So choose the one you like, listen, watch, read our episodes, and also share your thoughts in the comments. Because in this project, every opinion matters. And of course, subscribe to our channels and pages so you don't miss anything interesting. All the links are in the description for this episode. About your past creative work, it was once said, I found such a definition, an assessment, that it is a chronicle of our time.
well, I actually started back then during the Revolution of Dignity, and my previous project was connected to the revolution. And that's why I say that even then it was the first wave of protest musicians, and it seems to me that now protest musicians, my colleagues, have fizzled out, sorry. I mean, there's no protest left there anymore. It's already, well, unfortunately. There's a certain economic aspect since we're in a financial crisis. It's very difficult, as we know. You know, to be truly successful, to work diligently and to earn a decent living. And I clearly see how incredibly hard it is for many musicians. I observe how everyone is genuinely struggling, and this isn't even the most financially profitable field within Ukraine. So at some point I just decided that I want to do what I want to do, not for the money, but for creative satisfaction and for my own personal fulfillment as a human being. And that's why I freed myself from any economic obligations, from my own personal expectations. And I stopped adapting to the whole industry. I stopped, I stopped doing what was expected of me or doing things the way we used to by the book as musicians, because there are so many things related to relationships with people in the industry. And what I like about rap is that you come in and you're judged by your skills. The better your lyrics, the better the feedback you get. You can't slack off because there are a lot of talented people there, really, because the spirit of competition is preserved there, a healthy competition. It's not about having connections like being an artist whose manager hangs out or drinks with someone and paves the way for you. Since I'm the kind of person who always tells the truth directly to your face, honestly, I truly think that's my biggest problem in life. There were a lot of unpleasant situations, perhaps, that I genuinely didn't like because I would openly say I didn't like them, so I was often considered inconvenient in my own musical field. But in rap, I saw that everyone does it this way. I thought, God, this is my community. Finally, I can say everything I think. How much longer can I hold back, you know? So is rap more about freedom, or is it a sign of the times as well, or is it specifically a sign of the times and about how I feel? My personal opinion is that rap now carries the true meanings of Ukrainian society. We criticize our society, we speak the truth, which isn't connected to any personal gain. That is, we're not interested in profit. Rappers in general are against personal gain, especially if it's a rapper who, for example, isn't commercial. Because there are rappers who are very technical, very cool, but they still work as a commercial project. They have their own obligations, and I respect my colleagues, so I have no complaints. But rap itself is an underground genre, meaning it's a genre that has always come from the streets. And this idea that we are the voice of the streets, I think that's really telling, because the streets are setting the trends now. What's in fashion now is anti-fashion, if you know, for those who are a bit into fashion. Anti-fashion is now the truly defining trend. And I just got back from England, where I recently met a young English woman. And she told me that in England, she's currently studying to be a stylist, a fashion designer. And she said, oh, right now we are really inspired by making fun of luxury brands, you know, those high-end labels like Gucci or Chanel. We mock them, meaning we reinterpret them intellectually. We say, yes, we don't want to wear that, but we have a copy, an intellectual copy by some designer who is satirizing that brand. So this already points to a certain process of rethinking economic value, of realizing that you are a person, not just a brand that's bigger than the individual. And unfortunately, we still have this perception of luxury and the desire to get something that costs 1,000,000 hryvnias, but you just have to have that handbag. It's a way for a person to compensate for some of their insecurities. But over there, people have long since rethought this. In Europe, in France, they understand that you don't need to be showy, you just need to have taste and maybe a sense of humor, some sarcasm, and that's valued more. And that's why I think music is also now in the process of rethinking that. The oligarchic musical tradition, which was sponsored by oligarch-owned media, sponsored by oligarchs themselves, with artists who sang along with them, who broadcasted their values. And now there are people emerging who are conveying values inspired by their friends at the front, inspired by their friends who are doing heroic deeds, because in reality, that's what inspires all of us. You just can't ignore it when you see something like that. And that guy who's driving some Tesla or, I don't know, a Porsche, he doesn't even come close. I don't care what you're wearing, what you're talking about, or how much money you have. To me, you're nobody at all. You have no idea what war is. But when you go out to the front with the guys, talk to them, spend at least one time in a trench with them, then I'll respect you. But all these things people put on themselves, they're just covering up certain insecurities. And right now you can really feel that in Ukraine.
You mentioned that the purpose of your project is moral and psychological support. But why rap specifically?
Basically, rap is moral and psychological support for me personally. Well, because to start with, when I traveled, my performances with the cultural landing team were as musicians. I sang songs and I saw a certain disappointment among our soldiers, especially after the first counteroffensive, the second counteroffensive. Everything changed inside them, and how my music affected them before the counteroffensive. And with Zaluzhnyi, and then after Zaluzhny's dismissal, how I performed, what I conveyed, what we talked about, and all these conversations, feelings, and everything that was happening inside us, that's what shaped me as a person. And so in 2023, in the summer, in August, I went through a very intense internal crisis. I didn't feel needed in civilian life. I already felt like something was wrong with me, that I wasn't doing enough, and my music wasn't working, and I just wasn't right for myself. I wasn't satisfied. I wasn't happy with my life. In such challenging cases, I always have the strong urge to completely run away from my civilian life and join my brave friends in the military. But my friends always ask me whether, is that motivation really effective for you? I mean, running away from civilian life isn't a real motivation to join the military, first of all. Second, wait for the mobilization of women. Third, my dad said, I'm serving now and I forbid you to go. That was really hard for me. At that time, I didn't know what to do and I didn't want to sing anymore. And since I kept myself busy with literature courses at that time, because I'm someone who loves to read really anything related to literature and human culture, the nature of the human soul has always fascinated me. I was studying somehow, and at some point the exercises we did there, the new knowledge, new conversations, everything that was happening in my life, all came together to create a need in me to speak out. And when I started to say it out loud, to truly voice it, it really helped me. And when, well, yes, just to fully explain to people, moral and psychological support is, well, a specific term from our military sphere, and it essentially means providing crucial support to soldiers during combat operations. So we come as musicians and are part of the moral and psychological support. So I heard a lot about this. My friends who traveled with us told me about it. And we worked with psychologists and chaplains. So it would be a musician, a chaplain, and a psychologist going out together. And I thought, oh, that's cool, moral and psychological support. That's us, psychologists, chaplains, and musicians, artists. Well, I mean, it wasn't just musicians there. There were magicians or some illusionists, people who bring art in some form. And it was a revelation for me that we are that important force that helps keep people sane. But if you go in, if you immerse yourself in human trauma, and if you witness truly terrifying things, and I have seen some extremely critical moments in people, and it was very hard at times, especially when you visit the guys who have just come out. The infantrymen have just come back from a mission, and when you see their eyes, it's simply incomparable to anything else. You can't say anything because the fear of what they've seen is so overwhelming. Their consciousness changes so much that you just realize how incredibly hard it is. And if someone truly lacks motivation in their civilian life, I would absolutely just send them to those incredible people, to the dedicated infantrymen. All your motivation would appear instantly and you'd run and work for another year. Sit down, have a conversation, ask how they're doing, just be there with them. And unfortunately, the fundamental reason why the news doesn't truly work is because moral and psychological support is about finding deeper meaning, about finding our inner state. And the news doesn't give us that inner state. The inner state is something about the soul. It's about our consciousness, which we ourselves shape. And in order to shape that consciousness, you need to read it within yourself. The path I have walked to find something new within myself. I think I saved myself from a crisis. And somehow, this resonates with people. I don't know how interesting it will be going forward, but for now, it works for me.
By the way, we've already had a military chaplain and a military psychologist as our esteemed guests, and today...
A musician.
So I hope that in a certain way, if you watch our episodes, it will also serve as a kind of moral and psychological support for you. We really hope so. A question actually, again, about the love of freedom. Today in Ukrainian music, in your opinion, as you see it, do we have the continuation of this folk tradition of loving freedom?
Oh, there are many. It's just that I'm probably not focused on it right now. I just don't have the time, honestly, or the resources to really listen to all our music, because I'm very focused on the field where I work and on what interests me. And right now, the folk component doesn't really interest me, not that much. Right now, I'm more about lyrics, about literature.
I mean specifically and precisely about the lyrics, about the actual content, not about us just singing traditional folk songs, but actually, if you truly look at folk lyrics, they also don't always literally talk about freedom or the profound love of freedom, but this profound spirit of love for freedom can be deeply felt in many, many songs. Cossack songs, powerful rifleman songs, even beautiful lyrical songs, and in the dummy, it's truly present everywhere. Now, in our current, contemporary song tradition, is this love of freedom still present now? Is it represented in different genres?
Listen, well, I truly think that our music, just like all great literature and compelling theater, has always been a direct reaction to significant social processes. And so the profound response to what is genuinely happening in our daily lives and throughout the entire country, it is quite evident, is reflected in art. I'm sure that everything is there. I'm sure that right now there's just a surge of literary creativity, of literary activity. Books are selling like crazy, and there are literary festivals. People want to come and listen to poets. They stand in lines. It's wonderful. So this is a reaction to the fact that we are being destroyed, but we want to preserve what is ours. We want to know who we are. We study our language, we study our literature. And there is a certain beauty in that. And it seems to me that this is probably not about someone creating something about our love of freedom, but rather that when there is a demand, there is a lot of energy for it. And everyone opens up because there have always been and still are many talented people in our country, but at certain points in history, they were not seen, they were hidden, they were forbidden. And only now have they reached us, only now are we beginning to appreciate their value. That is how difficult our path has been, how much someone had to... You could say how unlucky it was to be born at a certain time in the Soviet Union, to be a Ukrainian poet, a dissident, and to die for it. And now, for some people, you walk around, you have a cafe, you have the opportunity to talk about these things, and we can only try to understand about... not just about creation, but for me, it's profoundly about a certain inner strength to truly live, to genuinely be yourself. We are indeed a very creative nation. Everyone here sings. Everyone actively does something with their hands, paints beautiful pictures, decorates their homes. Our homemakers meticulously create culinary masterpieces. We decorate everything around us with great care. We possess a very developed and rich decorative tradition. In other words, we are truly inherent creators. Everyone who is deeply involved in a certain literary or musical tradition is a co-creator, a collaborative artist. I don't separate the author from the listener or the author from the reader. For me, it's all a single unified moment. Because I am inspired by our simple life stories, and I don't write about myself like, hey, I'm this girl, everything is so great for me, I fell in love so beautifully. You could say that's basically the gist of all the songs. I fell in love, you didn't. You fell in love, I didn't. Today I'm feeling sad, so let's talk about what a wonderful day it is. So that was basically the whole range of our interests. Somewhere out there, thank God, Ukrainian rock and roll existed. We had a rock scene offering more. It was about freedom, Oki and Elzy, and the country. But essentially, all songs are shallow. The oligarchic tradition is about sex, some dumb story, nothing deep. All this was broadcast, and these songs seemed our reality, but in fact it's not our reality. Our reality is much deeper, and now people are very sensitive to their true history, to their real musical realities, and they are very sensitive to the topics that authors raise. And as an author, I am sensitive to what is happening to my people. I deeply empathize with Ukrainians. I worry a lot about my people. I probably don't cry anymore. There was a time when I cried a lot. And at some point, there was such a profound numbness that you just truly can't keep reacting with all these overwhelming tears and intense emotions all the time. You develop a certain coldness, a kind of rationality. And in some way, this has manifested itself in my creative work. That is, you start to address some cold topics. You notice it when you meet with heroes, because to me they are heroes. People who went to the front and were wounded. For example, my friends now. I see my friends who have been wounded, I talk to them, and I know how they were at first. I've known this particular path for a very, very long time for some people. And you just can't, you feel truly ashamed to think about some nonsense or do something trivial when you're next to people like that. Well, that's my own personal experience, Some people want to shut themselves off from all this and just live more simply. Let's make money, let's do business, where's the money? Well, this isn't really the world for that particular situation right now. It will eventually end later. That is, unfortunately, we currently have a critical mass of human suffering, and it will ultimately prevail, and true justice will certainly come. In other words, the voice of truth will set everything right, and I think there will even be some changes in that regard. In a very cynical way, actually. Maybe not everyone has truly realized it yet, but I definitely have indeed.
By the way, how did your family react to the new format, the new genre?
Well, honestly, I'll tell it like it is. I don't play it for my grandma. She knows I have rap songs with swear words. At first she was like, oh my God, granddaughter, with swear words, you were raised so well. Grandma, I just can't write about the war without swearing. There aren't that many. As for my dad, how should I put it? He's pretty skeptical about it. He tells me, oh, I miss your music so much. I say, Dad, I don't feel like singing. I say, that's how I feel right now. He's like, well, if you want to, then do it. So he's not my listener. My grandma isn't my listener either. My mom isn't my listener. My mom just adores it though. But honestly, if I made music just for my parents, probably only my parents would listen to it. And when you genuinely say things that are perhaps uncomfortable, even for your own parents and your closest relatives, then maybe you're actually doing something quite right. I think that's what it really means to be a creative person who truly keeps their finger on the pulse of their own human moments. By the way, this is about being freedom-loving. What are we talking about? Freedom to be yourself. I could be wrong, I'm not saying I'm some kind of truth. I am searching. But I need that range of my topics, that range of my mistakes. I am sure that my morals, my personality, which is already fully formed, won't lead me into some very destructive story, but it's creativity itself that helps me carve out the pain I feel deeply inside and deal with it, and to describe it. That's described really well, and there are many studies showing that when we experience extreme human emotions, those truly terrifying ones, And right now, we are actually going through the most frightening experiences possible in human life. It's very important to hear this and to talk about it and also to truly live through it. And coming back to moral and psychological support, I've always had this really deep desire inside to help soldiers truly live through their stories so that they know people are indeed talking about them, that they simply hear that some young girl from civilian life is talking about them and that we truly need them and we're constantly thinking about them. We completely understand what's happening, and then when they understand, when the military understand that people are grateful to them, and that's actually the most important thing we should feel, this gratitude and this respect, then we're essentially shaping a certain culture of how we treat these people who have given so much more than we have for our freedom. We can only philosophize about this topic, sit and talk, thank God, and we're given the opportunity to sit in these broadcasts. But the point is, we don't truly understand the price that's being paid, and my own transformation was connected to my direct involvement with the front line. I wasn't even there as someone who served. But even my connection to it changed me beyond recognition. Well, it just radically changed me. Because you can't remain the same after you've seen all that, heard those people, spent time in their presence. And if people haven't had that experience yet, then I think that it's precisely with tools like creativity that we can help them feel it. And when a person feels something and they understand what kind of empathy they develop, it becomes easier for them to understand what they can give to someone they don't understand. Something different, something new. That's why creativity now carries the mission of explaining the feelings and emotions of the various experiences of our Ukrainians.
If you truly imagine, and I sincerely hope, that people will still be listening to your rap music in 100 years from now, what essential message would you like to leave for them?
I really wasn't prepared for this question. Maybe by then someone else will decide what message I wanted to leave, or maybe I'll formulate that message later. I haven't figured it out yet. I don't have a message for 100 years from now. Right now, I'm focused on the present moment, and at this moment, I do have a message for people. In this very moment, I truly want people to seek out new and deeper meanings and understand that war is indeed work. It's a routine process. If you have established traditions, certain routines that we all do every single day, we brush our teeth every day, we drink our coffee, we drive to our work, we take our beloved kids to school, we're forming something truly shared. We have a culture of personal hygiene, a culture around our daily food, a culture of our important work and continuous learning. But when it comes to the culture of precisely how we fight, how we struggle, we haven't fully formed that yet, and only now at this point are we truly starting to become aware of it. Once again, it's actually quite creative. In the drafts of my texts, I try to describe what our culture should be like as a nation at war. Looking at our history, we fight very often. We're like, constantly rolling along. There's always something happening to us. We never relax. We don't have that. Even though we are very stable, inherently static farmers who never went anywhere, never did harm to anyone. And for us, we are not some nomadic nation that runs around attacking others. We are very home-oriented. But the Cossacks were nomadic, but they stayed within their own lands. We more or less had this aspect that the Cossack, specifically the Sich, but the point is that the Cossack was still separated from his family. They were more attached to the army, while the women lived separately. Just like that, just like that. But in essence, there were still women and there was always a place to return to. And so we need to understand that we are a country constantly at war, in reality, and the culture of it repeats and repeats, and we just need to rethink what we can do together to unite and do some kind of routine every day. If it's about donating, then how often should you do it and to whom? For me, it's clear. I only help verified military personnel, and as for my friends, what can I do for them? I help friends of friends because my friends ask me to help. Well, it's all very much as I'm able to. And if you set yourself a goal that you are doing something for the overall triumph and success of your nation, for the moral encouragement and upliftment of your nation, you are doing something, anything, I don't know, maybe learning the language, offering support, weaving camouflage nets, but you are doing something, then that is a shared culture. And it seems to me that reminders about the war through such human moments can truly and deeply motivate us to do these truly great things.
Today we were recalling female images in folklore and in general. What do you think? Is there a difference between how women and men feel and express their freedom? How do you feel about this yourself?
I definitely won't speak for men. Well, I'll speak for myself. I guess I'm very happy that I was born in this country, in this family, to my parents, because I was given the opportunity to measure myself and my freedom, even from home. I left once because I disagreed with the rules that were offered to me. For a year, I was basically in a state of protest, but it was a very thoughtful protest because it was essentially through a peaceful agreement with my mother. My mom acted as a mediator. She tried to negotiate with me. My path shows that if I am confident about something and if I get passionate about something, like this rap, for example. By the way, I was in Germany. Before our interview, I went to England and then to Germany. It's my tradition to visit my mom. My mom has been a displaced person since the beginning of the war. And I go, Mom, so what do you think about my rap? I say, Mom, I'm really interested in it. It's so fascinating. And she goes, and the money? I say, Mom, there's no money in rap. How's that? Then what are you doing it for? I say, Mom, please stop. So for my mom, it was a shock. And she says, I'm just worried about you, honey. And I understand that my mom is worried. For her, it's just some image she sees. But my freedom as a creative person is also important because it's my way of being myself and not giving in to the fears of my parents, the fears of my neighbors, the fears of my bosses or anyone else, not being afraid. This is probably about my feminine side because I can't speak for everyone. Every woman is different. We have women in non-creative professions and I think I can't say anything at all on their behalf.
So, for you, rap and your current creative work is much more about the love of freedom, about deeply held values, rather than simply about following fleeting trends? Well, in general,
creativity and following trends are somehow incompatible, you know? I mean, when a person is creative, they crave freedom, they want to say something fresher, something new. And artists have this characteristic trait as well. They are very free, you can really feel it. Back in the day, whether it was an actor or an artist, they were very free people, emotionally very uninhibited. And for me, rap is just who I am right now. I don't know who I'll be later. I hope I'll become a rapper and that I'll be good at it and that somehow it will lead me somewhere, I don't know. Let me tell you a story from my childhood.
Go ahead.
It was really funny. My dad and I came to spend the summer holidays with my mom at my grandma's place. My grandma lives in a village in the Rivne region. She's the kind of person who did all this embroidery. She was very connected to folklore. She remembers those old songs, old tales. We were talking about what my family used to call me, what my nickname was in the family. And Grandma says, Serhi, she is so incredibly creative. She is such a truly beautiful and wonderful girl. You absolutely should call her Povitrulia. It's a perfect name for her. But Dad says that's inappropriate. I'm not going to call her that. So for Dad, I remember when Grandma suggested Povitrulia to me, but for him it was inappropriate. Somehow I remembered this Povitrulia as something kind of inappropriate. When you mentioned her to me once, it really gave me a flashback. I knew my dear Grandma Halina. She's been gone for a very long time now, but she was exactly that wonderful breaker of cherished traditions from the Rivne region. I meticulously recorded my philological practice with her, as well as many fascinating stories and beautiful songs. She did a great deal of intricate embroidery, baked delicious bread, and had a traditional white oven. In contrast to Kryvyi Rih, which was Russian-speaking, I also had this kind of reality. That's precisely why I feel very comfortable and at ease. I can switch quite easily between different ways of thinking and approaching things. I understand how people from different regions think. And what our essential keys to each other truly are.
So your connection to traditions comes from your grandmother?
Yes, from my grandmother in the village in Rivne region. And my love for folklore. As a child, I loved folk songs. I had that kind of experience. I sang a lot of folk songs in music school. I mean, I learned them, not too many. And then university. At university, we had a separate course on folk art and Ukrainian literature. There, ancient Ukrainian literature isn't really connected to folklore, and in general, folklore repeats itself, it appears again in modern literature, so we constantly refer back to all of this. For me, for example, right now, I am truly and genuinely interested in what Onuka is doing, not because I know her personally, but simply because she truly conveys it so freshly. She's like, I call her the Ukrainian Björk. To me, she's an artist on the same level as Björk. That is reinterpreting one's own tradition, one's national heritage. In such a modern electronic sound, it's something cosmic to me. So yes, thank you.
Now you'll have a truly wonderful opportunity to sing a beautiful Ukrainian folk song because it's time for our very special traditional game with our esteemed guest, our unique folklore chest. And today, quite unexpectedly for the singer, there are many delightful songs inside. We are delighted to offer you 3 wonderful songs. You can carefully choose just one of them. Which particular song you'll be lucky enough to sing, we'll find out right away in just a moment. You simply pick one of these 3 sheets, look at the title, tell us what it is, and then, of course, sing for us.
All right. Oh, in the meadow, the red viburnum.
Oh, you're lucky because every Ukrainian definitely knows this song, and probably even many people abroad know it by now.
And this
Song probably best reflects, in fact, the freedom-loving nature of the Ukrainian people.
it's interesting that they give the second verse here, but I saw the second verse. Don't bend, red viburnum, you have white blossoms, don't worry, Ukraine, you have a good lineage. So is this the second one then?
The fact that there are different verses in songs, that's kind of a hallmark of folk songs.
Yeah, because right here, you see,
There's an interesting story about the song Oi u luzi czerwona kalina. It's not exactly a folk song because it was originally a folk song called Rozlilisia kruti berezhechki. And in 1914, Stepan Chernetsky in Lviv used it for a theatrical production, and in fact, that is how the song Oh, a red kilina in the meadow appeared. Cool. Originally authors, but later it became very popular that today everyone considers it folk. That is, it
became nationwide. It's like the well-known song, Oh, Why Didn't You Come, which was sung by the talented Trium Reneti, and the entire song sounds very much like a traditional folk one.
So this is the story of how a song went from folk to an author's, then from an author's back to folk again.
Yes, yes, our people pick it up and create their own meanings.
If a song truly changes, that's a clear sign that it's a folk song.
It lives its own life, it doesn't have a fixed form. In different regions, there are different variations of folk songs, naturally. I truly want to sing the entire verse that we barely know, because as you know, everyone already knows the very first verse. But there is a very good verse that it reminds us that we are still in the process and that we need new strength. And this is a very good illustration of what I want to wish our listeners and Ukrainians. Do not bend, O beautiful red viburnum, for you possess lovely white blossoms. Do not grieve, O truly glorious Ukraine, for you are blessed with a wonderfully free and resilient people. And we, your steadfast supporters, will always stand with you, offering our unwavering support and solidarity. We will proudly raise that beautiful, vibrant red viburnum, a symbol of our enduring spirit, and we will joyfully cheer up our glorious and resilient Ukraine with a resounding hey, hey. We extend our sincere gratitude for the inspiring and powerful variation provided by Andriy Klivnyuk. I am honored to continue your tradition.
Thank you, Blackfish.
Thank you, thank you. It was really a pleasure to come. By the way, this is my first interview, my first video like this. It's really cool that it happened as part of such a fun project. I'm very happy.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.
To wrap up, a blitz interview. 7 short questions, 7 short or not so short answers, whatever's more comfortable for you. What trait do you value most in people?
Honesty.
And which one do you consider the worst?
Lying when someone lies.
What inspires you?
People.
What scares you?
I don't really know right now what scares me. A nuclear catastrophe at the moment.
What helped you hold on during difficult moments in life?
Creativity. Songs and lyrics. everything new and creative that I do.
What is the main goal or mission of your life?
That's a very interesting question. The main goal or mission of my life, I probably don't know it yet. The main goal, I have different ones. Maybe first and foremost, I would genuinely like to be happy as a person. I truly want to be happy, and I want all the people around me to feel completely comfortable and at ease. That is, for me to be happy and for my personal happiness not to harm or negatively impact other people in any way whatsoever.
If you had to choose just 3 words that truly describe the people of Ukraine, what would they actually be?
Let me think. Well, let's say a genuine and profound love of freedom, because that's inherently about liberty, courage, and a strong, steadfast sense of pride. That's what Ukrainians mean to me. Pride is also about us.
And now we have the artifact segment where we ask our guests to leave something as a memento of themselves. Today in the studio we have the rapper Blackfish, so we decided to ask you to write and maybe perform a rap for us dedicated to the love of freedom.
I want to give this to your esteemed museum or your personal collection, since this will already be, in my humble opinion, a truly genuine folk song indeed. While we're here, we're tired. My dad silently... My dad really scolded me for this phrase. At the front, in the east, sorry, well, that's exactly how I'll write it. My dad is silently in the east and says, there's no need to help with fundraising. He'll manage on his own. He'll figure it out himself. The romantic period has passed. Now it's time for the doers. This is a line from my track Doers, dedicated to all the doers, to everyone holding the front. That's all.
Thank you.
And maybe it will really become some kind of museum exhibit.
Friends, today in our studio we had the rap artist Blackfish. Write in the comments what interesting things you learned for yourself. Do you think that love of freedom is one of the important values inherent to the Ukrainian people? Let me remind you that you can watch episodes of the Archetype of the Nation project on YouTube. Listen on your favorite podcast platforms and read on the website magicworld.com.ua. In particular, there you will find popular science essays prepared by folklorist Marina Demediuk, as well as recordings of folklore works performed by famous actors. Thank you for your attention and goodbye.